Your soul's dying for you to evolve. And if you don't solve it with one person, the next person you call in is going to show you a similar pattern.
For generations, women were shamed for trusting themselves, sensing things before they happen, and believing in their own power. No one encouraged them to embrace it until now. Welcome to Trust Yourself.
Hi, I'm Elise, but my sister calls me Sissy.
And I'm her sister, Heidi.
Okay, raise your hand if you keep attracting the same type of person in a relationship, good or bad. Raise your hand if you feel like your arguments in your relationships are stuck on repeat.
Probably.
Now raise your hand if you feel like all of your relationships feel pretty shallow at the moment, or maybe even non-existent. Okay, now put that hand down and hug yourself with it, because you are not broken and you are definitely not alone. Unfortunately, Heidi and I have been out of the dating scene for quite some time.
Unfortunately or fortunately?
Well, maybe fortunately. Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately for you, the listener, we're not in the dating scene. Also, our relationships with our husbands are far from perfect. So we are not in any position to give any love life advice.
Nope.
But fortunately for you, today we are joined by Jacqueline Stevens, also known as Jax. She is a Yale-certified soul alignment coach and transformational relationship coach. So after years of her own external success, but internal disconnection, she was climbing the corporate ladder, but struggling with her own relationships, which I've seen as a common theme for many boss babes that I know. Yeah. Jax has developed a method that blends coaching, energy, and spirituality to help other individuals like herself finally crack the code to deep and meaningful relationships. In this episode, we are going to explore how our subconscious attachment styles and childhood wounds shape the people that we attract. So if you always ask, why am I attracting this person? You're going to find out.
Blame your parents. Just kidding.
It's always the parents' fault.
Yeah.
But also we're going to talk about how to finally break free from those patterns, so you can start to call in a love life that feels safe and expansive and authentic. Even me, a married woman, I found this conversation so powerful. So let's get ready. Pause your rom-com and come chat with us about making relationships delicious again.
Ooh.
Hi, Jax. Thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today. We are excited to talk to you all about relationships.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Us too.
Welcome.
And to be honest, I never thought about relationship coaching as a part of a spiritual journey. I always just ignorantly assumed that those journeys need to be solo and inward investment.
Personal journeys.
Right.
Yeah.
But the truth is, relationships are still deeply part of our inner world, our inner growth too. So I love that you've recognized this and you realize that many people, especially in today's high pressure digital world, need help developing deeper, more meaningful relationships.
Yes.
So first, can you just explain a little bit about what your role is as a relationship coach?
Sure. Well, for those of you who might not know me yet, my name is Jacqueline Stevens. My company or my website is called Joy with Jax. That's my business name. Jax is my nickname. And I am a life, a leadership, and a love coach. I really love specializing specifically in the realm, or what I like to call the arena of relationships, and even more specifically dating, because I truly feel like our relationships or dating in and of itself really is a spiritual path. It's a path for transformation. Partnership in and of itself is one of the best mirrors that we ever get to have in our life. And so I really feel and know that there's this formula for the deeper that we understand our relationships, what's showing up in our relationships, our own energy, the better the path to joy ultimately, like creating, I like to say, like a more joyful, a more expansive, and a more secure, juicy life.
Ooh, I love that. Juicy life. Yes.
Yeah, juicy, like like a delicious, I feel like our romantic relationships should be this space of play and pleasure and growth. There's so much that happens in that space. And we're going to get it to right off the bat, but I was raised in a really religious home. And so didn't necessarily see that type of relationship modeled in my home. And so I think when I left my family and when I went to college, I didn't know this, but subconsciously in my mind, I was like, I don't want the relationship that my parents had.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. And they had a wonderful relationship in a lot of different ways, but it just wasn't like that kind of like soul connection or again, fusion for growth that I think is really possible and that people are really searching for.
Absolutely. So these relationships, when you're working with a client, is it mostly like spouse, partner, dating, or is it also coworkers and friends or sister relationships? Do you approach them all?
Yeah, such a good question. I'm in most of my clients, we are working towards creating more secure, juicy relationships. So that can be in stages of singleness. So while people are dating, but it can also be in marriages, but relationships dynamics show up everywhere. So one of my clients, she's in her 70s and we're working to get her art in spaces. And so it's like working with the relationship of understanding your self-doubt and understanding the things that keep you from being seen.
Oh, yeah.
All of these are patterns that show up. Yes, work, of course, bosses is one of them, coworkers, but there are certain relationships that tend to give us the most challenge. And so those are the ones that I tend to work with people on the most.
I love that. So in your coaching, you explain that people have patterns and attachment styles, which in turn can show up in our relationships. And I'm sure you could get into some very intricate, intense detail on this, but maybe in a general sense, could you explain what these patterns are and how they might show up for us, even subconsciously?
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of the root pattern, which is our attachment style. And so this is formed, they say up to 7, but it can be affected after. But it's primarily how our bonds, our primary bonds, usually with our parents or our caretakers, affect us throughout our whole lives. And so for today's purposes, there's generally 3 types. You can have a secure attachment, which means if your parent was to leave the room, you wouldn't really have an emotional response. It's like, oh, mom's left the room. And so if we think about this in romantic relationships, it's like, oh, my partner's not here. Like, no worries. My partner's, they're going to be back. Yeah. But with anxiety, this is my home base. This is how I was wired. Now I'm secure. When the parent leaves the room, the child experiences agitation, right? There's crying. There's this feeling of being upset. And it's because there's a worry that parent might not come back. There's this feeling of abandonment in one way or another. And so this really shows up again in our relationship. So needing constant reassurance or feeling like your partner isn't always there for you. And then the converse, what that tends to attract is somebody who's more avoidant, right? Yeah. And an avoidant, as a child, if the parent leaves the room, they might not show signs of abandonment, but they actually internally are having a very similar to response to what the anxious child is having.
Okay.
It's just not displayed. And so there's still like a desire and a need for connection and safety, but there's a feeling that might not be safe for them. And so anxious and avoidance tend to really have this amazing relationship where they play out each other's best and worst qualities. And so this is one of the most common things that we see in relationship patterns, but there's also energetic patterns, which I am much more of an expert in. Energetic patterns, which is what thoughts come up or how we physically respond or how we behaviorally respond to specific things. And I'll use an example, something that's like really common in dating, if you guys are up for it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, one thing that I hear from a lot of women is that men don't ask questions on dates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I always like to validate, that makes sense, but that doesn't mean that there isn't the possibility for them to be curious.
Right.
And so if you are always showing up on dates and you're like, oh man, men are never asking me questions, you actually start to attract that exact thing that you're not wanting. And the reason why is because you're looking for that response. And then when you get it, you're validating your own belief, which is men never ask questions. And so the pattern, the response is, I'm not going to take up space. Right. And so, but if you were to challenge that, which this is, I could turn any bad date into a good date. I could go out with any guy and he would have like the best date of his life.
I love that.
And the reason why is because I am going to show up fully. I'm not going to turn into like some small woman that's like, oh my God, he's not asking me any questions. I am going to take up space. I might give like a little pushback, or I'll give my perspective, even if he didn't ask for it. And that's because I'm a bold, embodied, like juicy woman. And so a lot of women don't have this knowledge or perspective of how, that might be true. Men might not be asking questions, but the realization that we can actually change that. And I see a lot of women just saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired. I'm tired of it. And it's like, it's the approach. It's just that your energy is inviting something in. And I'm really passionate about disrupting specific cycles, specifically in dating and relationships, so that we can actually create the things that we want, which is these relationships that feel good and secure, but also expansive. And so you can actually have both of those things. It's possible. It just takes a little bit of work.
Yeah. We all need a little Jax in our pocket on our dates. Like, what do I say? What do I do now?
Yes. That's one of my favorite compliments that I get from people is like, I heard you in my mind, or like, I heard you say this. So it's almost like I'm your little Jiminy Cricket that's like on your shoulder, like observing and giving insights. And I'm like, do this instead. And so I love that.
Oh, that's adorable. So if you do follow Jax on social media, you've probably seen her talk about why we attract the same type of person, even if that ends up hurting us. And so I know a lot of people tend to attract the same guy or girl. And we all have that friend that's going on about their love life, and you're sitting there already planning their breakup ice cream date in your head. And you're like, okay. But what I find interesting is that you explain this as the soul calling in triggers to help us grow. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Because I'm sure there's many people still out there saying, why do I attract this type of person? And what is wrong with me?
Yeah. And so to anyone who's listening that's like feeling that, I just want to say, like, you are not alone. Most people have gone through this pain or are going through this pain in one way or another. And so instead of just thinking, again, there's nothing that we can do about it. I'm a Virgo. I love to solve problems. And so this is why, one of the reasons why I got into this work, because I was like, how do I never create this thing that I created? How do I do it differently? And so I was introduced to this work by Harville Hendricks, and he takes you through this process of understanding that we are actively attracting the best and worst qualities of our primary caretakers. And so that might be, there's certain levels of abandonment or emotional neglect or negative self-talk. And so there's all of these things that our parents did that we loved and that we didn't do. And the magic sauce is energetically, we're trying to recreate that through relationship, because it's our subconscious's way of healing. And so again, for me, this is why I talk about how relationships, how dating, it is like the most spiritual path, because you're working to overcome the stuff that's really hard. And so what I teach people is what your stuff is and exactly what we can do about it in order for you to start to attract something different. And so again, this is like your soul's dying for you to evolve. And it's giving you opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And if you don't solve it with one person, the next person you call in is going to show you a similar pattern. And if you don't fix it there, you're going to find that pattern somewhere else. And so it's not about saying, okay, I don't want to see this pattern anymore. It's about the only way out is actually through. Yeah. And so that's what I help people to do, is like work through those patterns.
Oh my gosh. So we're reliving our childhood issues so we can heal them.
And honestly, it's any trigger. Any trigger is generally linked back to something from your childhood. Mostly ideal, of course, with dating and relationships. That was my biggest learning. That's like the medicine that I needed to give to myself. But it's also financial, right? How we relate to money, how we spend money on ourselves, how we invest in ourselves, or how we don't invest in ourselves, especially as women.
Yeah.
And so money, work, what we put up with in our life, what we allow as like, this is an acceptable experience. There is always, I love this. The universe isn't on a budget.
Yes.
She wants to give us so much, but we don't know, we're not wired to be able to receive it. And so that's what I help people do, specifically through the realm of relationships. Of course, it affects like all areas of your life. People make more money when we work together. I mean, I've had people like double, triple their income. It's all, again, relational. And I just think that, it's all connected. The way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything.
Wow. That's, I never really thought of it like that. And I mean, I feel secure in my relationship with my husband, but we could always expand on that. And there's definitely ways that I feel like we could be better.
I love that you're bringing that in, because I think that there's oftentimes this notion that like once you're married, it's like, okay, now it's like the work is done. Like, okay, I'm not single anymore. But it's like, it's not true at all. The same stuff that people deal with in dating is what people deal with in marriage. And so I love that you're like, there's stuff that we can work on, because I feel like your relationship, what if it could get better? As long as we're willing to show up and do the work. And of course, it takes two people to truly create change, but it only takes one person to change a pattern.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say we start to recognize that we are attracting this trigger. Now what? What do we do about it? We probably go to joywithjax.com, but like, what do we do? What do we do?
What I would say if you're in that place, like one thing I would say that I would love to do with this person is like do an energy assessment. And this helps for me to understand like what are the subconscious beliefs that are really coming up that are causing this challenge. For someone who is listening and is like, I don't have time to do the energy assessment right now. It's knowing that whatever that trigger is showing you, there's something, an unmet desire underneath. Can I give an example? Like my favorite example?
Yeah, please.
I always like to ground it in like reality. So a long-term partner and I would have this reoccurring argument. Maybe this sounds familiar to you guys. Like he would never wipe the counters.
Oh.
Just he would like do the dishes, but it was like, why are you going to like half-ass do the dishes and not also like wipe the counters? Like, and it was this perpetual argument. And I would taught him how to wipe the counters at one point. And I remember being like, this feels like insane.
I get it.
I'm teaching this like grown ass man how like wipe the counters. And so the conflict never got resolved in our relationship. But the best news about my work is you don't actually have to even be in a relationship to like remember what your triggers are. They're all really important.
Yeah.
And so as I started to immerse myself in this work, I was like, okay, there's the counters. And then there's something underneath of the counters. The counters just like represent something.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
The first thing it represents is I'm a Virgo and I like order.
Yes.
But the second thing that it represented for me was that I didn't feel like he really cared about what I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It represented like, this thing matters. And this is a very tangible way that you could show me like love and respect.
Yeah.
And so every time I was fighting with him about the counters, it wasn't about me being a Virgo.
Right.
It was about me wanting him so badly to give me this thing that I wasn't getting through our relationship, which is I value you, I love you, I respect you. Wow. And so the counters became this thing, this representation. And so once we know what the trigger is, we can go to the second arrow, which is like, what does that represent? And then when we know what it represents, that shows me what my need is. I need to be in a relationship, someone who values me, who's curious about what it is that's going to make me happy, and who wants to do those things.
Yeah.
That's the medicine.
Wow. I love this so much. And I was laughing because I am the one in the relationship that doesn't clean the counter.
Yeah. I was going to say, your husband's the opposite.
Well, he's the Virgo.
Yeah.
I'm the Scorpio. But
Happy birthday season.
Thank you. Thank you. But it is kind of funny because I always thought I was very organized growing up. But once I married Sean, I realized I am not that organized or put together. I just kind of go with life, go with the flow and have fun. But I do realize that that is a point of pressure for us sometimes because he's like, well, don't you respect my cleanliness? Like, keep the kitchen clean.
Yeah.
What is wrong with you, Elise? And I'm like, well, I'm just going to go watch the kids and hang out and bring some mud into the house. No, I'm
Totally. Here's the thing. First off, love a Virgo. How amazing that you've got a man Virgo.
I know. I work with a Virgo and I'm married to one.
Yep.
Yeah. The second of all, I think the really amazing thing is like recognizing like you just see it different. You know, you're just like, it's just a little mud on the floor. But to him, it represents something different. And so the first step in like bridging that gap and bridging the conflict is just recognizing, okay, we have like different views on how this plays out for us. And if neither of them was wrong, and if both of them were valid, what would we do then?
Yeah.
Because the immature part of us that argues is patriarchal and it's like right and wrong, this way or that way.
So true.
And it's about control. And relationships are not about control, at least successful ones.
Right.
They're about collaboration. And so it's like, how can I see my partner, recognize that this is different? It's this principle called the second arrow. It's not the counter. It's the thing that's underneath of the counter, right? So once you can see the second arrow, then you can start to see him more and be like, oh my God, babe,
Yeah.
I didn't get the counter. Let me get that. Like, and you can start to give him the acknowledgement that he needs, but it might be in like a different way. Because to him, that's a wound. And you're like not giving it a Band-Aid or any Neosporin. And he's like, babe, like, I need the Neosporin.
Stop the bleeding.
I'm just smearing the blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. He's like, I'm bleeding out. I need the tourniquet. And you're like, I don't have time. I've got the kids.
Oh no.
And he's like, but my arm's missing.
Tis but a wound. Tis but a scratch. No,
feel it.
I'm kidding.
I know.
That's so great.
We got to make it funny, you guys. Otherwise, it's
do.
like we'd cry.
So
and
true.
so this is, I think the difference between at least my coaching and therapy is therapy, you're going to cry. And you might cry in a session with me, but you're going to leave in a way better place than what you came in with. You're going to leave with energy.
I love it. Well, I mean, honestly, Jax, I feel bad that we're not paying you right now because I feel like I've already gotten so much. My brain is exploding with information. I love it. I mean, not even just thinking about my relationship with my husband, but also my parents. This is making me look at things a little differently. And I got to say, I like it because it helps me make a little bit more sense of some things that trigger me today.
Floors?
Floors. Yeah.
Floors trigger me.
Yeah.
Floors are yours, Heidi.
Well, you know, our mom, bless her soul, she just was always very much like the floors were her thing, and she would travel for her job. So she'd be gone for 3 or 4 days, come home, and we knew floors were her thing. So we'd we'd clean the floors before she got home, and then she'd come home and then still sweep the floors. And we're like, well, did we not do it good enough?
It wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So we never felt good enough probably with the floors.
So her floors represented something else too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Can I give you a reframe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm so glad you guys did the floors, and I'm sure it instilled valuable skills. And I know your mom really appreciated it too. But also there's just like something about like moving it through the body, nobody does it like you do.
That's so true.
And I, as a Virgo, I feel like when I do that stuff, it's just a way of me like releasing stress. Mm-hmm. That was one of her patterns, was like, I know I can kind of like release some stress as I like feverishly sweep the floor.
Yeah.
So part of it was about you, part of it's not about you. But don't let it hold you back anymore.
Yeah.
It's like you did a good enough job.
We tried.
Yeah.
Okay, so family aside, I do have a question that is slightly tangent, but because you work with relationships every day, I'm so curious about this because I've been thinking about this a lot, even since I was little, I'll say. I'm curious, what do you see as the impact on girls, little girls and women of this Disney prince narrative that, every princess needs a prince to save them so that they can get married and live happily ever after? Or in Christianity, even you see the narrative of you need a savior to save you, to go to heaven. All of this is external, and it feels like you aren't good enough by yourself, if that makes sense. So do you see this impacting our relationships?
Such a good question. I'm going to kind of tee this up in two ways, is like what we've seen in the past and then where we're moving towards. And I'll just use an example. I mean, I grew up on classic Disney movies. Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty was my favorite. The Little Mermaid, we got new ones we got some new ones. I wasn't allowed to watch that one at first because Ariel looked slutty because she was in a bikini.
Oh, yes. She was half naked. Right.
Yeah. She was half naked. And that was, you needed to be wearing t-shirts under the water, So we had a lot of past programming, but let's just like look at I think it's one of the most successful Disney movies of all time. Frozen has a very
I
different,
like Frozen.
It does.
It's more sisterly.
Yeah. And so we are at this point of change. Of course, we had feminism. We have feminism that is still evolving. But this issue isn't just in terms of relationship. It really is our societal addiction. And so it could show up in relationships. It can show up in religion. It can show up with alcohol or drug use or pornography. There's a million different ways. And I look at all of this as a way that we're in one way or another trying to self-soothe.
Yeah.
Right. We're trying to feel secure. We're all trying to feel like we're enough. And so I look at the old model as it is relationships that are intended for survival. And so it's like two halves make a whole, a man and a woman. It's like my soul mate, someone that completes me. And the way that I think about the new relationship paradigm is we're all, we can now say that most people are past surviving and we want to move to relationships that thrive.
Yeah.
Right. So what are the relationships of the future? And the relationships of the future are where both people are fully self-sufficient, independent, but also desire to be collaborative. And that's called interdependence, or you could call it collaborative relationships. But this is really relationships of the future. And I've done a lot of my studies in energetics. And so I like to think of it too in terms of like energy. There's relationships that you have that you leave and you feel expanded, right? You've got more energy. And so in a divine relationship where both people are committed to growing together and committed to showing up fully you actually create energy through relationships.
Yeah.
You create energy. You have access to more than what you would have by yourself. And so that's the new relationship paradigm, which doesn't involve princes saving princesses, or again, princesses being in that victim mindset. And we could get real biblical if we wanted, but Jesus didn't do his work alone.
Right.
He had a partner. I believe that partner was Mary of Magdalene. I mean, if you think about any man in the world, the most productive men, they have partners.
Yes. Yes, they do.
And again, it's energetically, they have access to more of themselves through partnership. And I've done a little diving into the teachings of Mary Magdalene, but what she basically teaches, which I am teaching in one way or another, is how to be fully self-sufficient and sovereign energetically. And so that you can attract somebody that is also in that space, and you can do that work to really grow together.
Yeah, super important.
That is so important. I love that. So for our listener listening to this saying, oh, I feel like I'm going through this right now, and I don't have those deep relationships, what are some ways that she or he can start attracting more meaningful relationships? Is there something they can do right now?
Yeah. So I would say, just like if you're listening to this right now and that's where you are, grab your journal. And I want you to just take one sheet of paper and draw a column down the middle. And I want you to write in one column the challenges, and in the other column, the things that are good. And you need to be identifying the characteristics and the things that are happening in relationship that make you feel expanded, or the things that make you feel contracted. And so clarity is the first thing that we need. We need awareness to facilitate any kind of transformation. And then there's a formula, understanding what's needed based on those things. And again, if somebody wants more help with that, then that's where I would absolutely be love to support you. Everything is solvable. That's what I want people to really recognize, that in relationship, everything is solvable. It's energetic math, and it's okay that you don't know how to do it, but learning how to do it is going to significantly change how you show up in your life and the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships, because you don't need to blow up every relationship because they're not working. I guarantee there's something about you not being able to ask for what it is that you want, or you not being able to ask for feedback. And so the way to get better relationships is to make that list and then develop the skill set to work through your own challenges so that you can start to attract the things that you really want.
I have a curveball question. So like, if everything is solvable, that's great, but that doesn't always mean that you should always be with that because people still break up, right? So I guess my question is like, how would you know if you've worked on things, if everything's solvable, but then like you're still not feeling it or something? Like when do you kind of decide that? Yeah,
I love this. So when I say everything is solvable, I mean for you.
Yeah.
And so being solvable for you means you've done enough work and have enough understanding to recognize, okay, is this relationship serving me or is it not serving me? And being discerning enough to make the decision to move in towards alignment with yourself. Because sometimes that does mean moving away from another relationship. So focusing on, this is specific to women, focusing on self first is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And knowing that yourself, creating an actual ego, what I want, what I need, what I desire, because it's really easy for women to stay in the over delivery and the like giving him everything that he wants and he needs, and not being an advocate for like, hey babe, I love you, but I've got a bunch of needs too that haven't been addressed.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a little bit resentful because I don't feel like you're taking them seriously. And so when you're ready to take them seriously, I'm here ready to have a conversation about more ways that I can meet your needs when you're willing and ready to meet mine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Heidi, I'm glad you asked that question. Okay, Jax, this is probably going to be a hard question to answer, but
I'm ready for it.
What has been the biggest takeaway on relationship advice that you've noticed since starting this work?
Such a good question. And the first thing that just really comes to mind is I mentioned, again, I'm a Virgo, so it's really easy for me to diagnose everybody else's stuff.
I feel that as a Virgo as well. I can tell you what's wrong.
Yeah, we are wildly gifted. And so when I left a long relationship, we were together for 7 years, I was crystal fucking clear on all the ways that he didn't show up for me and all of the X, Y, and Z. And I felt super empowered, like knowing what my needs were. Mm-hmm. But then it gets to a point where I was like, I chose to be in that relationship for 7 years.
Yeah.
And so diagnosing somebody only goes so far. It also, so basically what this work has taught me is to like really look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And so anytime something is coming up that's like challenging or doesn't feel good, before I have brought it to somebody else, what I really love about myself is I know that I've done the internal investigation to see like what is really happening with me. And I think I feel blessed that that's my superpower now, but it was not before. It was a learned skill. And so also just letting people know that this stuff we're not taught how to do this. And I think that that's what really kind of drives me crazy is that this should be a class that you take in elementary school.
Your energetic math, like you said, that should be a lesson.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then you learn more in junior high and then you learn more in high school. And you're like learning this stuff your whole life, because if we knew how to relate to people, we would have a completely different society.
Yeah.
How we function as a society, what we would be accepting of and what we wouldn't, who we would vote into office and who we wouldn't. Mm-hmm. All of these things would be determined on people's social skills, how they are in relationship, how they're working through conflict, how they're listening to their constituents or their family. But to do the work to get really curious about like, what does this mean about me? I think is the best anti-aging serum that there ever was.
I buy that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Jax, thank you so much for opening my eyes to the importance of relationships more than I ever thought. Because to me, it's just like, yeah, I've got good friends. I'm married. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Sure. But it's so important, like you said, throughout our community, not just who we're directly impacting. It's so powerful. Thank you so much. I'm
and
so
like
glad.
I want more of us to be like greedy in relationships.
Yeah,
right.
Like,
I agree.
To want more, to give more. And resentment is a real problem. And so I think specifically with women, when we feel slighted, we won't give. And so again, the energetics with that is like, how do I move from that resentment into a space of being able to communicate throat chakra? Mm-hmm. How do I communicate what's happening for me so that I can get back to the space of being giving? And I want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Nothing big, just about sin.
just a little sin.
Just about sin. Just we're going to end on sin.
Okay,
some real juicy. But sin, to me, teachings of Mary Magdalene isn't the act of like telling the lie. It's not the lie that's the sin. It's believing that I had to tell the lie. It's believing that I needed to mask something about myself. That's the sin. It's straying from who we naturally, truly are. It's not the thing. And so again, when I think about this energetic work, it's like, instead of pointing the finger or you've got the 2x4 in your eye, it's like, okay, what do I have that is living inside of me that I haven't yet been able to communicate? And what's that gift that I can give? And trusting that the people that we choose to be in relationship are man or woman enough to be able to handle it.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Well said.
Oh my gosh. I already know we're going to have you on again because we have just barely scratched the surface.
There's so much to talk about here. So,
but thank you so much, Jax. And if you want to get in touch with Jax to start diving into your relationships, I'm going to include her contact information in our show notes, or you could go to joywithjax.com.
Yeah. Or DM me on Instagram. Is so fun. It's like, I'm a real person behind it.
Yeah. I love it. But thank you so much, Jax. We really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah. I'm so honored to be here. Just love connecting with you and to see your sisterly bond. And I feel like this conversation, especially through that, so much is going to percolate from this. So just be in marination about what you want to talk about. Next. There's just so many tangents from Christianity to there's just so many things that we could talk about that I feel like are so powerful for people. So thank you guys so much for centering these conversations and the work that you're doing. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Heidi, I did not realize I would have so many things that I wanted to share with my husband about after this conversation. So what was your biggest takeaway?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed the whole conversation, especially when she's talking about being greedy, like it's okay and we should be greedy in relationships. Yeah. And, she mentioned that women tend to overgive, but I also want to bring up that this can happen with men just as easily. I feel like maybe I'm a bit dominant in my relationship.
You're a rare breed, Heidi May.
Yes. So I do, I recognize that sometimes I feel like my husband can be the overgiver, but not out of anything negative, but usually just, like he wants me to be happy. And I think sometimes he needs to be greedy though too, and recognize that there are things, there are needs, wants, and desires that he has as well too, that he's learning to voice. And maybe it's just because my voice is louder.
It's not quiet.
I'm not quiet. So, but just reminding everybody that, it doesn't have a gender bias. We all need to learn to speak up and be greedy when it comes to relationships and what we need.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we do tend to stereotype the genders with those attachment styles and things like that. But I think you're right. We do all need to be a little bit more greedy. I love that. I love it.
Yes, I do too.
I loved the fact that she brought up that your triggers are always representing something. So like counters and floors represent more than just a need to clean and be a neat Nelly.
Yep.
And then when you figure out what that represents, you figure out what your need is in that relationship. So I'm going to have to do some deep work tonight.
I think mine can sometimes just be, I was just on vacation and then I come home and then there's just a bunch of what I would just call like kid food at the house. So like, chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and corn dogs. And I'm like, can't you just like make a meal? That's maybe my trigger because like mom was so good at always having home cooked meals. But I'm sure, dad did the same thing. It was Jack's Pizzas and kids cuisine. So it's just, it works. We're fine. But why is that a trigger for me? I'd be like, don't you care about them, that you want them to have healthy meals?
I definitely picked up dad's traits on that. So when I am home with the kids alone, it is Jack's Pizza and chicken nuggets and I gave
pizza rolls. Kids cuisines. Oh, pizza rolls too. Have your kids had kids cuisines before? Because I made my kids them and they did not like them. They didn't like them. I don't even think they were any better back in the day in the 90s, but
I remember the plastic feel and
the
taste.
Plastic, the pudding part that was like heated.
Yeah, heated warm pudding. Lisa, can I have some more?
So good. So fun.
Oh man, this is why I love our podcast, because we love helping people start to rewrite the stories that they've been handed, whether those are stories from religion, childhood, or Disney fairy tales. We like to look at things through a different lens and ask the strange questions. Ask the questions that people aren't really talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that note, Heidi, let's jump into our tarot for the week.
Okay.
And give me those juicy cards.
Let's see how delicious they are today.
Delicious. What's the most romantic card in the deck? Lover's card? What's that one?
Well, Lovers, Two of Cups as well. That's a good one.
Two of Cups.
What do we need to know about our relationships this week? That one flew right out. Oh, it's the Emperor, number 4, which is focus and stability. Okay. And 4s are always about foundation building as well. So I think that this is a good reminder to just kind of strip it down and really get to the foundation of relationships, which is communication. Maybe we should learn how to communicate a little bit better.
Communicate and communicate our triggers, even if they are silly on the outside. Yeah. Wipe the damn counters, Elise.
Yeah, I'm not going to say anything about that for you.
It's okay. I'm working on it. Okay. Anyway, I loved this episode, Heidi. And if you did too, again, please check out Jacqueline Stevens at joywithjax.com. All of her information's in the show notes, and share this episode with that one friend who is probably 2 dates away from another spiral. You know who they are.
Not calling anyone out.
No. And until next time, it's your move, sis.
Make it count. Bye.
Bye. I'm just smearing the blood everywhere.